Hi, this is Jeffrey Reddick, creator of Final Destination, and you are listening to the 80s Slasher Librarian.
But remember, the risk of cheating the plan, of disrespecting the design, could incite a fury that could terrorize even the Grim Reaper. And you don't even want to fuck with that, McDaddy. I'll see you soon.
Tonight's upload is brought to you by our patrons from the Patreon page. That's Cecilia Spears, Hawaii, Carl Leakins, Catherine McClear, Sean Campbell, Iron Alexa, Allison Sibe, Ryan Woodward, TikTok12, Bree, and Bonanza Jellybean. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel through Patreon. And if anybody listening right now enjoys the content of the 80s Slasher Librarian YouTube channel, and would like to help keep it going and growing for a long time to come, then click the link in the description below and sign up on Patreon for as low as $2 to $5 per month. You get some great rewards depending on the tier you select, such as the $2 tier gets you the early access content, the $5 tier gets you the early access plus a free ebook emailed to you every 3 months, and every 12 months you get a free gift from the merch store. There's also a $15 tier that gets you a free gift from the merch store every 6 months, a free ebook every 3 months, and you can appear on the podcast and voice a character in an audiobook narration once per month. So there's many choices to choose from. Just click the Patreon link in the description below and check it out. There's even a mega tier that comes with a lot more stuff. And enjoy tonight's upload of Final Destination Dead Reckoning. Final Destination Dead Reckoning. Chapter 10. "So," said Charlie. He glanced in the rearview mirror, then reached down and fiddled with the seat adjuster. "So," replied Jamie. The two of them sat in the car waiting for Jess. Outside, partying students walked by, glancing with curiosity at the ambulance parked outside the security block. "You want to go in after her?" asked Jamie after a while. "There's no point. She's a big girl. She'll be fine." The silence in the car was almost deafening. Jamie slouched down in his seat, drumming a little solo on his denim-clad thigh with his index fingers. "Nice night," said Charlie, sounding strained. "Yeah," said Jamie. "Good weather we've been having lately." "Uh-huh, this is California. Good weather's pretty much a given." "Indeed." Jamie nodded to himself, thinking, "Come on, Jess, get back here." Charlie whistled a little song to himself, then clicked on the radio and fiddled with it, trying to find a good station. There was no real signal here. For a moment he caught the strains of what sounded like Aerosmith's Love in an Elevator, but the song was swamped by static at the end of the first chorus. He clicked the radio off and sat back in his seat. Amber loved Aerosmith, Charlie remembered. His mind swam with guilt. For a moment he almost hoped that Jess knew what she was talking about. "So, you, don't believe Jess?" he said to Jamie, trying to break the ice. He fancied he could almost see frost forming on the windows of the car, despite the evening heat outside. "Why should I?" Jamie sat up in his seat, peering glumly out of the window. "Last Thursday she was convinced that mice had stolen her boots. She was dead serious about it." He gave a wan smile. "Jess ain't exactly a poster girl for sanity." Well, that was a conversation killer, thought Charlie. 3 leggy girls in miniskirts walked by the car, peering in at Charlie and giggling. They walked off whispering to each other and glancing back at him. Charlie watched them pass, giving them a little salute. In the back seat, Jamie resumed his drum solo. "Do you have to do that?" said Charlie after a while. "What? Oh, sorry." Jamie stopped his drumming. He folded his arms and stared moodily out the window. Then he pulled some gum out of his pocket and popped a stick in his mouth. He started chewing loudly and was gratified to see Charlie wince in irritation. "Do you think—" said Charlie, then stopped. Jamie sighed. "Do I think what?" he asked, blowing a careless bubble with his gum. "It's just that, well, how long have you known her for?" "By her, I presume you mean Jess," said Jamie. The temperature in the car seemed to drop even lower. "And I've known her since she was 12. And your point, Charlie?" "My point is," said Charlie carefully, I think you need to let go of her, man. Jamie stopped chewing. He blinked, unable to believe what he had just heard. What the fuck do you mean by that? I mean, said Charlie determinedly, she doesn't think about you in that way. I talked to her about you. I was curious. She told me what happened between you guys. She told you? What the? Jamie stared at Charlie slack-jawed. Yeah, she told me everything, all the nasty little details, said Charlie with relish. He pulled what he hoped was an innocent face. But she didn't give me any indication that you guys were anything more than just friends, man. We are friends. We've been friends a hell of a long time, and where the fuck do you get off asking her about me? Jamie removed his gum from his mouth and stuck it under the leather-upholstered seat, somehow managing to make the move threatening. He sat forward in his seat, glaring at Charlie. Charlie shrugged. I just wanted to know. I care about Jess, you know. I didn't want to see her getting hurt in any way. Jamie's eyes flashed. Okay, number one, you don't care about Jess. You've known her for what? All of 3 hours? Come off it. He glared at Charlie in the rearview mirror. I know your type. You just want to fuck her. You're all about the sex with the pretty girls, and you don't give a damn who gets hurt in the process. Charlie snorted. Is that what you believe? No, it's what I know. Jamie dropped his voice. You think I don't see? Waltzing around like you're God's gift or something? You and all your tough guy friends? Jamie shook his head, clenching his fist in his lap. You have no idea how lucky you are, getting to go to the college, no crappy dead-end job for you, slogging your guts out for a lousy couple of bucks an hour. No, just a nice car and a nice allowance and a nice apartment that you never even fucking earned. Jamie put a hand on the seat rest in front of him, glaring at it as though it was personally responsible. He let out his breath through his teeth. All you are is just a big waste of your daddy's money. Some people would kill to do what you're... You know what? Never mind. He transferred his heated gaze to Charlie. But you don't go to college to learn. You go to get laid. That's all you give a damn about. And you're in a band because... Jamie stared at Eric for a moment, his mouth working. That's different, he spluttered. Is it? Of course it is. I'm a musician. He stopped. What? What's so funny? I've heard you play, dude. And? And you were very musical. All that yelling and jumping around with your shirt off. Tchaikovsky would have been proud of that. He couldn't have done it any better. Name 3 works. What, by you or Tchaikovsky? Good Stalin. Were you going somewhere with that point? Hey, buddy, I'm just saying. It just so happens that you get to spend a lot of time with Jess, being musical together, because you're in the band. She's our lead singer. Of course we spend time together. We're a team. Are you now? Charlie gave an annoying little smile that Jamie wanted to hit. Yes, we look out for each other. That's what friends do. She said once that She told me that you were a nice guy. Jamie stared, his expression frozen. She said what about me? You heard. Jamie turned away from Charlie and looked out of the window towards the security block. He couldn't believe it. I'm sorry, man, said Charlie, not sounding sorry at all. Jamie reached up and slowly rubbed at his shoulder. Why the hell had Jess said that about him? Being called a nice guy was like a death blow to any man alive. He teased Jess for saying that about all the guys who hit on her in class. He knew what it meant. Nice guy. Wouldn't want to date him. He would add the second bit himself whenever Jess said that about someone, which she did a lot. It was like their private joke. A lot of the guys who flirted with her were nice, she'd said, but that's all they were. They didn't have the spark to them, that indefinable thing that meant the difference between a best friend and a lover. Jamie had hoped someday that he would fit into that second category. And now what? Jess had started saying that about him? After everything they'd been through together? When did that happen? Had he really been that switched off lately? Jamie sighed. I have to go talk to her, he said. He reached over and unlocked the side door. Wait here. Do I have to? Jamie reached into his pocket and pulled something out. He waved it in front of Charlie. Now you have to. Hey, that's my cell phone. Where'd you get that? A little birdie gave it to me. If you're still here in 10 minutes, you'll get it back. With that, Jamie slammed the car door and began trotting away towards the entrance to the security block. Charlie watched him go. Then he grinned and thumped the steering wheel. Damn, I'm good. Opening the car door, he jumped out and hurried off after Jamie, telling him at a distance. If this guy was going to get humiliated, he wanted to be there to watch. It was too good of an opportunity to miss. So this door was closed just a couple minutes ago? Yes? No? I don't know, Jess, squealed Ben, holding up his hands. Jess had practically backed him into a corner and was holding him up by his collar. Get off me, you mad woman! I don't know anything! Well, which is it? Don't ask me. All he told me to do was to watch the door. Ben pointed frantically. Why did he ask you to do that? No reason? Jess dropped Ben onto the floor. He backed away from her, rubbing his neck and looking bewildered. Jess crossed her arms and fixed him with a stern look. What was your name again? Ben, said Ben meekly. Okay, Ben, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to tell me what's going on with you two. And what if I don't? Then I'm going to press that elevator button with your head. You wouldn't? Try me, said Jess. Well, said Ben, his eyes flicking towards the exit like a trapped mouse. It's like this. He took a deep breath, opened his mouth as if to speak, then bolted towards the door at top speed, vanishing before Jess could stop him. 2 seconds later, he reappeared, moving backwards at high speed. Jess watched as Jamie strode in through the door, his eyes fixed on Ben. Hey, Jess, Jamie called. Is this the guy who was hanging around with Eric? Yeah, that's a safe bet, said Jess. Oh, come on, guys. I don't know anything. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me what's going on, said Jess. What is going on? Asked Jamie. Is Eric okay? That's what I've been trying to find out. Oh, hello, Charlie. Do come and join us. Hey, Jess, what's happening? We're all talking to Ben, said Jamie. Come join the party. What's he done? Nothing. It was all Eric's idea. What was all Eric's idea? The thing? What thing? The thing with the party and with the, With the what? With the elevator? Ben wished heartily that he could keep secrets. He hiccuped, then rubbed again at his neck. You mean Eric did something to the elevator? No, that thing with the guard just kind of happened. It wasn't anything to do with Eric. He was going to do something, but then he vanished upstairs and left me all alone down here. Ben backed up a couple of steps as they all stared at him. Hey, here's an idea. Why don't you all go find him and let me go home? Because I'm tired and oh my God, you people are scary. Because we're here now, and so are you, said Jess, taking hold of Ben by the shoulders and propelling him across the room. You're not leaving. Come on, help me get that door open, then we can get some answers. She walked across to the fire escape door and began pulling on it, then bent down and peered through the keyhole. Ah, she said, here's your problem. Glue in the lock. Haven't seen that one for a while. Jamie, hand me that knife of yours. Knife? Ben paled slightly as Jamie obligingly reached into his boot and pulled out a wickedly curved street knife. Here you go. Thanks. Jess poked the end into the keyhole and began prying it back and forth, carving the glue out of the lock. Jamie sidled up to her. Jess, how did you know that I had a knife? He asked. I didn't, but I do now, Jess said. You're from the other side of Venice, right? Down past Rose? Right, but how did you... I've seen the street you live on. Ah, I see. Clever. One and the same. Jess got to work with the knife. Could be worse. At least you're not stupid enough to carry a gun. Beside her, Ben became suddenly and intensely interested in inspecting the ceiling. He rocked back on his heels, whistling quietly to himself. Okay, that'll do the trick. Jess handed the knife back to Jamie. She tugged on the door handle. It's opening now, but it's caught on something. She pushed and pulled on it a couple of times, but it repeatedly thumped on something on the other side of the door. "It's stuck. Could someone help me out with this? I need to get upstairs and find Eric." "Why do you, I don't know. Why don't you just use the elevator?" said Charlie. "Ben says it's broken. Here, Ben, help me get this door open." "Do I have to?" "If you want to live, you do." Charlie watched as Ben helped Jess struggling with the door for a moment, then shrugged to himself and wandered towards the main exit. He peered out into the crisp night air, watching as they loaded the security guard on a gurney into the back of an ambulance. "Hey, Jess," he called out. "What happened to that dude?" "Tell you in a minute," puffed Jess, heaving on the door. "Huh?" said Charlie. He shrugged, then wandered back to the elevator and gave it a cursory glance. The call button was flashing. Hey, maybe it wasn't broken after all. Charlie reached down and pressed the call button with his thumb a couple of times, then stood back expectantly. There was a weird humming sound from the elevator. Then the doors whined and started to open. He turned and faced the others as the elevator's door swung open behind him. "Hey guys, elevator's working." He gave a little bow to Jess. "No autographs, please. I'll hold the door for you." Jess looked up. Her eyes widened in alarm. "Charlie, wait!" she yelled. "Don't worry, my sweet. I'll wait. I'm not going anywhere without you." Charlie gave Jess one of his patented glowing smiles. Then he stepped backwards through the elevator doors and plunged 10 feet to the ground. There was no elevator in the shaft. "Charlie!" Jess and the others rushed to the elevator door and peered frantically down into the dark bowels of the elevator shaft. At first she couldn't see anything, but then as her eyes adjusted to the dark, she could just make out the prone form of Charlie, lying sprawled on the floor beneath the elevator mechanism. To Jess's relief, he seemed to be moving. A weak groan echoed up towards her. "Oh my God, everyone stand back!" Jess stepped away from the elevator doors and turned to the main exit. "Somebody help!" she yelled. "We need help in here!" She grabbed Ben by the shoulders. "You, go get a paramedic in here now!" Okay, but I think he's all right." Ben inched towards the elevator shaft and peered down. "Charlie, man," he called. "Are you okay down there?" "Don't worry about me," called Charlie feebly. "I'll be fine." There was a warning creak from the elevator shaft above their heads. As one, they all looked up. "Aw, shit," muttered Charlie. With a scream of severed brakes, the elevator fell on him. Jess gazed into her frying pan, watching dazedly as her eggs and bacon popped and fizzled in the oil. A delicious smell of frying food filled the apartment, but for once in her life she wasn't hungry. She reached automatically for the pepper and sprinkled it liberally into the pan, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the far wall. Charlie was dead. She couldn't believe it. This amazing, wonderful, sweet man had just been completely erased from the world, and there was nothing she could do about it. She was still waiting to wake up and find out that this was all some horrible nightmare. What had happened to her life? Jess was shocked at how much her priorities had changed in less than 48 hours. They'd done a complete 180, in fact. 2 days ago, the biggest dilemma in her life had been deciding whether to wear rubber or leather for Friday's show. It had seemed like a huge thing at the time, affecting so many things: the band's image, Tony's opinion of her, her ability to both dance and breathe simultaneously, everything. Now all those people were dead, and people were still dying. Jess felt like she had somehow stumbled into someone else's life, and now couldn't get back out again. This didn't seem real. How could this be happening to her? The signs. The cowboy had said that there'd be signs. Jess tried to think back. What signs had there been that Charlie was about to die? She thought hard for a moment. He'd been killed by an elevator. Had she seen anything warning her about it? Well, there had been that bumper sticker on the Humvee, but that was surely just a coincidence. And thinking about it, that story in the paper at Charlie's place had been about some guy getting trapped in an elevator, but that was hardly an obvious warning. Jess stopped, her spoon poised over the frying pan. She remembered the book that she'd picked up at the downtown warehouse the other night. She'd picked it up completely at random, and it had opened on a page about how to escape from a stopped elevator. The smell of burning reached her nostrils, and Jess blinked, reaching for a knife. Deep in thought, she scraped the burning bacon loose from the frying pan and added another couple of eggs, flipping the charred remains of the first two into the trash can. She lit a scented candle on top of the stove and switched on the ceiling-mounted air conditioning unit to get rid of the smell of burnt meat. Had those been real signs? Jess rubbed her eyes tiredly. If they had been, how the hell was she supposed to have picked up on them? Maybe if she'd been looking specifically for stuff about elevators, she would have noticed them, but how could she have known? It was just crazy. She couldn't see everything as a sign. A person could go mad living their life like that. Jess looked down. Her hands were shaking again. Even in her shell-shocked state, Jess realized that her body was close to exhaustion. She was far too wired to eat, but she knew that she probably should have something, if only to keep her system going. She hadn't really slept or eaten in almost 2 whole days. She was too tired to cry, too tired to grieve. The only thing that was keeping her going was the thought that when she finally got to go to sleep, she'd wake up and find that none of this had really happened. If Cassie were here, she'd be given such a scolding. Jess tried to shut her mind to the thought Cassie was dead, just like the rest of them. She leaned back and reached for a plate to distract herself, wiping her eyes with a hand. "Dad, would you like anything?" she called above the noise of the fan. There was no reply. Jess sighed and took a couple of steps backwards, peering around the edge of the kitchen doorway. In the living room next door, a scruffy, balding man slept on the sofa in front of the television, snoring loudly. Jess turned down the stove and silently padded through into the next room. "Dad!" she called again, shaking the man's shoulder. She noticed that her father had a couple of new tattoos on his forearm, joining the others that already covered most of his body, forming a kind of second skin. Jess snorted. How long had it been since she'd last seen her dad? Must have been a while if he'd had 2 more tattoos done. Her father collected tattoos like most people collected stamps. Rumor had it that he single-handedly kept afloat many of the eclectic tattoo parlors on Venice Beach, and several of the less eclectic ones. "What?" said her dad, stirring. He opened one bloodshot eye and blinked at her. Jess noticed a small platoon of empty whiskey bottles on the floor next to his chair. He'd hardly stirred when the cops had dropped her off, but then, with her lifestyle, that was nothing unusual. "Do you want food?" asked Jess softly. "Food? What time is it?" Jess glanced at the cat-shaped clock on the wall. "Oh, I'm sorry, it's after midnight. I didn't realize." "What?" "I was just hungry and thought you might like something." "At this hour? I'm fucking sleeping. Can't you see that?" Mr. Golden raised himself up an elbow and peered at his daughter through bloodshot eyes. "Cops were banging on the door for you all day. Couldn't get me no sleep, had to lock the gate in the end." He sniffed, wiping his nose on the back of his hand. "Can't have them fuckers coming in here, poking their big noses around. It was bad enough last night I had to shift all my stuff around. Took me ages thanks to you." "Sorry, I just thought that you—" "Don't think. Push off. I've got a big job tomorrow." Her dad rolled over and grabbed a pillow, dragging it up under his head. "Little brat," he muttered, curling up in the chair. "Suit yourself," Jess said, adding, "And I'm nearly 20, you asshole," under her breath. She grabbed a couple of the empty bottles off the floor and started walking back towards the kitchen. She stopped as a thought struck her. "Where's Mom?" she asked, trying to keep her voice level. "Dunno, probably dead or off banging that bastard lawyer of hers. I ain't seen her in days. Now clear off." "Fine." Jess stalked back into the kitchen, hurling the whiskey bottles into the trash as she did so. A half-dozen flies buzzed up in alarm. Jess grabbed a nearby canister of bug spray and angrily doused them in spray, killing most of them before the spray can ran out. She tossed that into the bin as well. Switching off the stove, she slid the steaming bacon and eggs onto a plate and cleared a space on the rickety kitchen table. She sat down heavily and stared at her food. The food stared back at her, the bacon and eggs appearing to be two eyes and a grinning mouth on her plate. "What are you happy about?" she asked the bacon, prodding it with a fork. "You're dead too, right? What's so good about being dead?" She cut off a chunk and chewed it, wincing as bits of charcoal cracked between her teeth. "On second thought, guess you don't have to worry about dying anymore, lucky pig." "Are you talking to your bacon?" said a voice. Jess looked up as the kitchen door swung open. "Hey, Macy," she said, rising to her feet. "What are you doing here?" "I saw the light on and thought I'd swing by. Couldn't sleep. You know me, night shift and all." Macy gave a half smile. Then her expression changed. "Well, not anymore, I guess." Macy was without makeup for once and looked drawn and pale. She took a hesitant step into the kitchen, hanging back, not sure if she was disturbing Jess. "Jamie called me and told me about what happened." She shook her head, making her silver hoop earrings swing back and forth. "It's horrible, just horrible." "I know," said Jess. She didn't trust herself to say more than that. "Why is this happening to us?" "I don't know." Jess grabbed the back of a wooden chair and tipped several hundredweight of newspapers and unpaid bills off onto the floor. "Here, sit down." Macy sat primly on the edge of the chair, glancing around her at the room. "I'm sorry about the mess," Jess said after a moment. "I think I cleaned this place once when I was like 10. Macy flapped a hand. "Psh! Don't worry about it. You should see the state of my apartment. Oh!" She pointed, covering her mouth. "I think your cat's died." Jess looked. "No, he's fine. That's the way he always looks." Jess got up and scooped up J-Bo, her scarred tortoiseshell Tom, removing him from his upside-down position on top of a beer crate. He meowed in protest, then settled back in her arms, the deep bass rumble of his purr filling the room. Jess smiled, rubbing the cat's ears. "He sits on anything new in the room. Dad's always telling him off for making his beer all warm. Hey, if you stay here for long enough, he'll probably come sit on you." "Does he bite?" Macy stretched her arm out towards J-Bo, who opened his eyes and regarded her hand with a look of haughty contempt. "Only if you smell like food. His eyesight's a bit crap." "Hey, sweet kitty!" Macy gingerly stroked J-Bo's head with a finger, grateful for the temporary change of subject. "What happened to his eye?" "He got in a fight." "And his ears?" "Another fight." "And his side?" "Yet another." "Oh, no, that's just chewing gum." Jess ran her hand up the cat's back, feeling the sticky mess attached to his flank. "J-Bo, I thought I told you not to sleep in the trash," she scolded him. "Come here." Jess hoisted the cat up over one shoulder, then reached for the scissors and started clipping away at his fur. J-Bo regarded Macy steadily over Jess's shoulder, a self-satisfied look on his face as he lapped up the attention. There, that's better." Jess threw the matted mess of fur and gum into the trash. "Go on, be off with you." She pulled up a chair and sat next to Macy while J-Bo purred and rubbed up her ankle. "Charlie was the good-looking one, right?" asked Macy, unable to put off the topic any longer. She put her cell phone down on the edge of the table. "Yeah, he was, kind of," said Jess. She swallowed a lump in her throat, her mind filling with glowing pictures of Charlie. It was his smile that she was going to miss the most. "Did you know him very well?" "We used to go to school together. He was in the grade above me." Jess stopped, beginning to think. "We were kind of friends, but he never really talked to me. We had this little understanding, you see. He would say hi to me once a month or so, and I would refrain from stalking him, most nights." Jess gave a sad little laugh and then sobered up. "But the way he looked at me, there was definite potential there, if you know what I mean." She scratched her nose reflectively. "Of course, then he went and died on me. That kind of put a damper on our relationship." The bright kitchen light stung her eyes, and Jess reached out and clicked off the main bulb. She gazed sadly at the kitchen rug under her feet. Above her, a large fly that had been endlessly circling the light bulb buzzed away from it and zipped downwards, attracted to the secondary light of the scented candle. It zoomed through the flame in a state of great excitement, setting itself alight, and fell downwards before expiring quietly on top of the stove. If flies could think, it would have thought something along the lines of typical. A gust of air from the open door caught its tiny burning body, sending it tumbling onto the pile of receipts stacked up next to the oven. After a moment, a small flame flickered in the depths of the pile. Over by the kitchen table, Macy reached down and stroked Jabo, who promptly snapped his teeth at her hand before resuming his innocent purring. She sat back up on her seat, tittering nervously. "Oh, so you didn't know Charlie that well then? I thought that you guys were, pretty tight, from what I heard. Jamie said—" "I did know him. I knew a lot about him," said Jess, thinking, yeah, his favorite color, where he liked to go for dinner, where he hung out practically every night of the week. Macy shrugged. "He never paid his tab," she said matter-of-factly. "In fact, I was going to ask, well, you wouldn't happen to have $350 on you, would you? He still owes me from last month's tab." "Do I look like I do, Macy?" Macy swept the small apartment with a glance. Then she reached for her purse, looking awkward. Would you like to?" "I don't need to borrow any money," said Jess automatically. She tried to smile. "But thanks for asking." She pictured Bill's leather-bound wallet lying buried under 300 tons of rubble, and cursed herself again. Maybe she'd go back over there tomorrow, make a few inquiries. The electricity bill was due in about 10 days, and she had about as much faith in her dad's jobs as she did in Santa Claus. "You're welcome," said Macy. "Jess?" "Yes?" "I'm scared. Seriously. Why is everyone dying?" "I don't know." Jess shrugged helplessly. "It's just a coincidence, I think." "But 4 people have died now, and they were all people who escaped from the club disaster. That's one big coincidence." "Macy, I really don't know what's going on." Jess stood up sniffing. "Do you smell something burning?" "But you said that you knew what was going to happen back at the club," insisted Macy. "You said you saw it all in a vision, like some kind of message from God or something." "I'm not religious, but I did see something." Jess glanced distractedly around the apartment, trying to locate the source of the burning smell. Then she stopped, staring at Macy. "Wait a moment. Did you say 4 people had died?" "Yeah, it's just so tragic." Jess glanced up at the ceiling, counting on her fingers. "Who's the 4th?" she asked. A thought hit her. "Please tell me Eric's okay. Not that I care." "Eric's fine. I heard that he's been released from the hospital already." Macy tutted under her breath. "He was so silly, falling down the stairs like that. He was lucky he didn't break anything." Macy looked up at Jess, a girlish grin on her face. "He never pays his tab either. But he's kind of cute too, don't you think?" "Absolutely not, but go on." Jess gripped the back of her chair. "What about number 4? "Oh, didn't you hear?" Macy reached into her pocket for a tissue and dabbed at her nose. "That police officer, the one they arrested, she's dead." "You're kidding. No way. What happened?" "Spider got her." "What?" "She was bitten by a spider, a poisonous one. They say it must have been a black widow, for it to have affected her so quick." Jess put a hand on the table to steady herself. Black specks danced in front of her eyes. This couldn't be real. When did this happen?" "This morning. She was still in the police cell waiting for bail, the poor thing. Her partner never showed up to get her. Cops all went to get lunch, and when they got back, she was dead. Her leg was all swelled up like a balloon where she got bit. They say her heart just stopped." "I can't believe it. How—" Jess stopped, her mind flicking back to the morning when she'd been woken up by Charlie in the police cell. It seemed so very long ago, but now a nasty little memory was jumping up and down, waving its hands. Hadn't she seen a spider in her cell? A big black one crawling into a crack in the wall. She'd only seen it for a second, but it had been kind of big. Oh, it couldn't be. Please, tell me that it hadn't been a Black Widow. There were a lot of them around in L.A., Jess knew, but she hadn't heard of anyone dying of a bite in a long time. She'd known the drill since childhood. Stay calm, don't rush around or do anything that'll spread the poison through you, and get your ass to a hospital straight away. You had about an hour to get to the emergency room before it was too late. And ambulance response times were relatively quick these days, even with the L.A. traffic. But if the officer had been left alone in the locked room for longer than that... Jess closed her eyes and bowed her head. Nasty. Macy took out her handkerchief again and blew her nose. It's just... I don't know what to think anymore. What if there's some kind of crazy killer out there, bumping off everyone who got out of the club? He could have put the spider in the cell, cut the elevator cable that Charlie guy got squished by, pushed that girl under the car? Macy, that's crazy. Who would do such a thing? I don't know, sniffed Macy. But that's what I think is happening. It's just too much of a coincidence. I had this horrible dream last night where some monster dressed in robes was chasing after me. He was all made of bones, and there was this terrible noise. I probably shouldn't have had that double pepperoni pizza before going to bed, but still, it was really scary. I had to put the light on for the rest of the night. My kitty cats thought I'd gone crazy. Pizza before bed is never a good idea, said Jess thoughtfully. At her feet, Jabo gave a plaintive meow. Jess reached down and picked him up, hugging him close to her chest and burying her face in his warm fur. Then Jabo's whiskers twitched. He twisted in her arms and began struggling to get down. Make up your mind, cat, Jess said mildly. She put him down and watched as he bounced away from her towards the back door. He reared up on his hind legs and began scratching on it, begging to be let out. That's odd. Jess watched the cat. Then she sniffed again. This time she definitely smelt something burning. She turned around, her eyes scanning the room. Oh, crap! Behind her, the pile of paperwork next to the stove was on fire. What is it with this world this week? Said Jess. She ran towards the stove. As she did so, one of the burning papers drifted down off the work surface and landed in the trash can. The mixture of alcohol-soaked newspaper and sugary cat hair flared up instantly. Jess jumped back as 2-foot flames shot out, glancing around her wildly. She grabbed the frying pan off the stove, filled it with water, and tossed it toward the fire. Dad, fire! She yelled towards the next room, as though this were a regular occurrence. Fuck off! Came the sleepy bellow from the next room. Fine, I'll just deal with it then. There was no reply. Macy rose to her feet and ran over to help Jess as she refilled her pan from the faucet. The water she had thrown hadn't made much of an impact. Macy wrenched open a cupboard, then another, searching for something to put water in. Where's your fire extinguisher? She gasped, yanking open the pantry door. Jess pulled an apologetic face. Dad pawned it last Wednesday. She tossed a kitchen towel into the washing, soaking it with water, and held it up, ready to throw it over the fire. At that moment, the flames reached the can of bug spray in the trash can. It fizzed briefly as the flames heated the pressurized contents, then exploded with a bang, sending a rain of flaming trash all over the kitchen. Jess was thrown backwards, crashing into the kitchen table and tumbling to the ground as it collapsed beneath her. She rolled over, dazed, clutching her head. Across the room, Macy closed the pantry door slowly as the echoes of the explosion died away. The ripped open remains of the aerosol canister were projecting out of the door at about head height, driven almost completely through the wood. Macy gulped and glanced fearfully around the room. Several small fires had started up here and there, burning merrily amid the heaped mountains of discarded paperwork. Above her, the ancient AC unit whined, starting to suck up the smoke. A piece of whiskey bottle glass tinkled merrily around inside it, bouncing off the blades. What in the blazes is going on? Jess's father stood in the doorway, his hair sticking up in all directions, blinking at the scene. His kitchen was on fire, and his daughter was lying on the collapsed remains of his brand-new poker table. There was some slut in a skirt standing over by his beer cupboard, and she was looking shocked. None of this was good. "Jessica!" he growled. I muttered Jess, trying to get to her feet. Her legs gave way, then she tried again with similar results. Jess's father scowled, his face like thunder. "You girl, hand me the fire extinguisher!" Jess said you sold it." "I did no such thing." The man paused while his face readjusted itself. A touch of self-righteousness entered his eyes. "Pass me the phone, then." Jess stumbled to her feet and lurched across the room towards the sink. Her clothes were smoking. "The phone was cut off 2 weeks ago, Dad. Don't worry, it's just a little fire. I'll put it out." She broke into a fit of coughing. "Where's that saucepan?" Macy silently pointed. Jess looked down to see it stuck to the floor, melted into the linoleum. "Oh," said Jess, looking up at her father guiltily, who glowered down at her. There was a grinding sound from the ceiling. Jess looked up. Everything seemed to go in slow motion. It was as though she were watching herself from a distance. Jess cried out and sprinted towards Macy, shoving her away from the stove. A fraction of a second later, the elderly AC unit gave a creak and plunged downwards, jarred from its rusty ceiling mounts by the force of the explosion. Jess and Macy landed in a breathless heap as the heavy unit hit the floor with a crash right where Macy had just been standing. A clicking buzz came from the wreckage as the fan blade started to slow, still attached to the ceiling by a long length of wire. "Hey, I paid good money for that thing!" "Then you'll just have to buy another one, won't you?" said Jess, disentangling herself from an ashen Macy and helping her to her feet. "Perhaps you can sell the cat this time. That should about cover it." "Just you wait till your mother gets back." Mr. Golden strode over to the sink and picked up the wet cloth, then marched around the room, beating at the flames and muttering under his breath. "And that's likely to happen when?" "Watch your mouth!" Jess's father put out the last of the fires and hurled the charred towel down onto the floor. "You've been living here rent-free for 16 years. 19 years.
Whatever. It ain't gonna happen for much longer. Soon as your mother gets back, she and I are gonna have some words."
"Good luck with that one," Jess said sweetly. She turned to Macy and tried to smile as her father stamped out of the room, slamming the kitchen door behind him. "I think you better get going. I'm sorry about all this, Macy." Macy nodded silently, glancing back towards the fallen AC unit. "That was close. I thought I was a goner. Did you have another vision?" she said. "No, I just have a very, very good sense of hearing," said Jess. She listened to the spinning fan blade as it jumped and hummed, caught on the linoleum. "And I think I should switch that off before it does any further damage." She walked across the room to the wall switches. She glanced back over her towards the humming unit and waved a hand. "Hey, J-Bo, get away from that!" She turned back to the wall, hunting for the off switch. Ignoring her, J-Bo paused in his exploratory circle around the unit, then bunched his muscles and jumped up onto it, sniffing it experimentally. His weight tilted the unit to one side, and he leapt down again with a meow. The unit started to pitch forwards, its whirring blades plummeting towards the floor. At that moment, Macy's cell phone went off. Macy turned her head sharply to see where the noise was coming from, then felt a gust of air hit her ear as something whizzed past her head at high speed. There was a clang from behind her. She spun around to see Jess staring fixedly at the wall behind her, where a fan blade was buried in the thin plaster. Said Jess. "I think you better go home now." Macy put a hand to the side of her head, checking that her ear was still attached, then shook herself and trotted over to the collapsed table, looking dazed. She picked up her cell phone and clicked it open. "Hello?" Jess switched off the power and studied the blades sticking out of the wall. Then she turned and surveyed the mess that filled the kitchen. The fallen unit, the broken table, the little smoking piles of embers dotted here and there. It was almost as if something wanted Macy to get hurt, but there hadn't been any signs. Or had there? She jumped as Macy tapped her on the shoulder, her hand over her phone. "It's the sheriff," she whispered. "Says he's been trying to ring you all night." "What does he want?" "He says he needs you to come to the station tomorrow morning. He wants you to make a statement about Charlie." She paused. "He sounds kind of weird." "That's fine. Tell him I'll be there." Macy glanced at her. "Are you all right?" "I'm just dandy," said Jess, pulling the fan blade out of the wall. "Go on, talk to the man." Macy shrugged. "Okay." Jess looked down at the blade in her hands. This was seriously creeping her out. Maybe she had somehow been cursed. She didn't believe in such things, but since Friday night, everyone who came near her seemed to be having horrible things happen to them. She did a swift mental calculation. Out of the 9 people who'd made it out of the club, now only 5 of them were left, including herself. A shiver ran up Jess's spine as she watched Macy talk on the phone. The sheriff may be old-fashioned, but he wasn't stupid. She may have been temporarily cleared of suspicion over the club disaster, but now his chief suspect was dead. What if he and his goons decided to come after her instead? If anything happened to the other 4 survivors from the club, she had a strong feeling that she could soon be back in that police cell, facing some very tricky questions. She put the fan blade down carefully on the worktop and started methodically picking up the strewn papers and cutlery from the remains of the table. Tomorrow, after she'd finished at the station, she'd get everyone together for a talk. The deaths of the other 4 may have been genuine accidents, but perhaps that was because their brush with death had made them careless. This whole sign thing was crazy, but at the moment, it was all she had to go on. She needed to talk to the others, make sure they were taking extra care until they'd recovered from the effects of the club disaster. They all needed to watch every step they took in the next few weeks, for their own sakes as much as hers. Jess looked down at her feet where Jabo was enthusiastically polishing off the spilled remains of her dinner. He lifted his head, licking his lips, and fixed her with a bright-eyed gaze. He began to purr. Jess considered everything that had happened. Everything that had happened before, everything that had happened that night, and came to a very definite conclusion. "I think I need some sleep, Jabo," she said. It was quiet in Jess's bedroom. The numbers on her bedside clock glowed 10:38 p.m. Her door was locked and barred, with the sturdy chair pushed up under the doorknob. On the bed, Jabo stretched and curled up tighter at Jess's feet as she slumbered. A small puddle of happy warm cat protecting her from the darkness. And as Jess slept, she also dreamed. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Chapter 10 of Final Destination Dead Reckoning. We're down to the main stretch now, guys, with the story. I gotta say, I'm a little more impressed with tonight's chapter than I have been with the past few chapters. I love the whole... And, you know, I gotta back up some of the stuff I said before, because I do love how this book sets up the little situations that almost get people killed or does get people killed. You know, it does such a good job, just like the movies do, of the whole cause and effect thing. The flies coming out, killing them with spray, you know, having to cut the gum off the cat, put it in there, all that turning to flame, getting jammed up in the air conditioner, all of that. Just all of that all together was awesome, great visuals. I'm still not entirely impressed with the writing of the characters, but as a subscriber pointed out to me, they are all teenagers, which kind of makes sense for them to be kind of flip-flopping and being moody and all that, and their personality changing so much. Charlie, not sad to see him go. I wish we would have got more of an explanation on what happened after he got squished, instead of just jumping like to late that night or the next day. Would have been cool to see them find Eric in the stairwell and get him to the hospital. I think that's another complaint I have about the book. It skips a lot of stuff. It doesn't skip it, it just ties it up in a neat little bow later. Like, instead of us being there for a lot of stuff, we just get told about it, you know, like in the next chapter. That's the complaint I have. But overall, I am enjoying this book, and I will take back what I said. I am enjoying this book more than Dead Man's Hand. All I meant to say about that book was it was slow all the way up to the middle, but when it hit the middle, it went into high gear and never slowed down. This book is like fast, slow, 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 fast, slow, 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 fast, slow, 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 fast, fast. You know, it's just all over the place. This book is better than Dead Man's Hand. Alright guys, I'll be back very soon with more of this book. Let me know what you thought of tonight's chapter in the comment section below, and I'll see you soon. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and
I'll see you soon.